As long as my brain is still working and I'm physically capable of doing the job, I see no reason why I would want to sort of sit down and hang up the spurs, so to speak.
This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good afternoon, Peter Hogg. Previously, episode 636 of the 12-Minute Convos podcast. It's been just 2 years, 10 months, 10 days, 2 hours since we last recorded our conversation.
The country is divided enough, and I think it really is a time that it's important for the country to come together. I mean, certainly that's where my hopes and dreams are, that we can turn this around and make the country stronger again.
That was then, this is now. Peter, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm excellent. So it is just been a bit since we last spoke, just about 3 years, yeah. And I remember the conversation just like it was yesterday. I was listening in preparation for this today, and I was just amazed by what I think is who you are, which is 2 words you pressed on, which I believe was integrity. And there was another word that you kept talking about during our conversation. I believe it's how you showed up for individuals. What's new in your world, Peter?
Well, besides the market going through the roof over the past 6 months, the landscape today is considerably more risky than it was the last time we spoke, and it's being reflected in the valuations of not only the precious metals, gold and silver, but also some of the PGM metals, especially metals such as rhodium. I think when we spoke, rhodium was probably in around the $1,400 level. Today it's trading just shy of $5,400, almost up $4,000 since our last conversation. And I think when we had our last conversation, palladium was trading somewhere around $1,100 or $1,200, if I remember right. It might not even have broken $1,000 yet. Today it's trading at almost $1,700. And gold's up some $300 and silver's up some $3 since we last spoke. So there's been a lot of activity in my field. And that's obviously not only good for business, but it's created a lot of volatility in all of the markets, both domestic and global. So it's been an interesting time to be in the business for the past 2 years.
Well, I can well imagine. Now, are you still with Kitco?
I am.
All right, so we're speaking from what you've been doing there, which was at the time of us connecting, I think it was like about 7 years you were with them. That puts you at what, like 10 years now? Over a decade you're with them?
Almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years February of 2020, so I'm almost at a 10-year.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, when I spoke with you, getting up at 4 in the morning, starting your day at that time was something you did. And of course, you were monitoring the markets even at that time, right? How have things evolved today, and how do you approach what you do with Kitco now?
Well, it's the same, basically just a different day. As I think I mentioned to you when we first introduced, I've been doing this since 1974. And, as I mentioned, I think the last time we spoke, this is one of the few businesses. And in the interim of me being in this business for almost 45 years now, I've had opportunities in other fields. I was involved with a public company that introduced microchipping for pets for identification purposes back in the 90s. And I've run some other businesses in the interim of me being in the precious metals field. And I've always found this field to be unique in the sense that no matter what day it is, you get up in the morning and everything is different than the day before. Yeah. So, I'm still getting up at 4:30 in the morning, California time, and trading until about 2 o'clock California time, which brings me into the close in New York at 5 o'clock. And still, not only do I run the trading operation for Kitco in North America, but I continue to be responsible for the operation in the Far East out of our Hong Kong office. Wow. So, the context of the job that I'm doing, not much has changed. The landscape of the markets have changed, and I'm obviously a little grayer and a little older, but other than that, everything's about the same.
Now, it's fascinating to me the way you are looking at how the experience is when you're going to work, right? And you said, no day is the same, and I like that. There are many people who subscribe to a work environment like that. Now that we are looking at it from the perspective of who you are and how you approach approach your day? How have you seen that impacted everything that is around you, your family, your life, your career life as well?
Well, my children are adults now, so they have their own lives and they've got their own worries when they get up in the morning and their own paychecks that they need to earn and their own expenses they need to cover. So they've now grown into the reality of what it is to be an adult and to be independent. My wife used to be in the commodities business back in the 80s and 90s, so she understands what I do for a living. And I try to get a good balance in what I do. I mean, I really do put the effort in when it comes to doing the job, because it's not the fact that I have an obligation to do a good job because I'm getting paid by someone to do the job, but I also love doing the job, so that helps. But I also balance that with, I play a lot of softball, and not only in a recreational basis, but we have competitive tournament teams that I'm involved with. So I do get my exercise. So I do get to socialize and enjoy, sort of my free time, both on the softball diamonds, and also I play some golf and I fish. And I do try to balance my work and my social life, albeit my work life probably still has the upper hand, and probably always will have.
Now, Peter is not 45, amazing audience, even though he sounds like that, if you are guessing. You are just around, well, let's say you're just around 68, 69, I'm guessing, right? And you're doing all of these things. Peter, how amazing is it that from wanting to be a teacher to now being offered a job back in those days, and to see what it's created? When you look back from now to then, do you have any regrets?
Oh, geez. It's really hard to say I have regrets because I really don't know what the other life would have looked like. So it's difficult for me to say, geez, I wish I could have been a teacher, because I could have been a teacher if I wanted to be one. Again, I've just sort of enjoyed this field. It's just been very unique. It's very robust. I mean, you're always on your toes. You have to think quickly. And I'm an A-type personality. So I think in that context, I'm not sure if I could have found a field that would have met that sort of dynamic within my own personality. So it's difficult to say that I have regrets. I mean, I've had a full life, and hopefully I'll continue to have a full life. And, the fact that I'm going to be 68 in April of next year, and I'm still doing what I love. Again, I mean, I don't envision myself not doing this and then sort of sitting there and playing golf every day. That just doesn't strike me as who I am as an individual. And, just sort of sitting there and retiring. To me, I can see myself just sort of finishing off my life sort of on the trading desk with one last trade is kind of the way I envision it.
Yeah, retiring sounds bitter in your mouth.
Well, it's kind of boring. I mean, I see the guys around me that are my age that are retired, and they play softball with me. But after the softball game, I sort of wonder what they do the rest of their day.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just don't know what keeps them sort of driven and motivated. And, they all seem happy, so that's good for them. But that just doesn't seem to fit my personality. So, as long as my brain is still working and I'm physically capable of doing the job, I see no reason why I would want to sort of sit down and hang up the spurs, so to speak.
I love that. One of the things I think is pretty fascinating with you is you've kept it old school from the perspective of communication. It feels as though you take the time to have that face-to-face, one-to-one interaction. When you look at that principle of hedging, and you apply it to everything that's happening in life, not just the financial side, do you think it's applicable to be able to hedge relationships online as opposed to what can occur building relationships face-to-face?
Well, you nailed it. I think I am old school. I'm very disappointed in the younger generation. I guess there are certain reasons for it. When I was a kid growing up, as far as my memory goes back, 4 or 5 years old, when I had a little bicycle that was probably the better part of 2.5 feet tall. And I was with my buddies at 4 or 5 years old. I was miles away from my home on my bicycle. And my mother never seemed to be worried. And, as soon as I got whatever food I was going to eat in the morning in my belly, I was out the door, and it was a challenge to get me back home. Now you go into neighborhoods and it's a challenge just to see children on the street. And the interaction that the children now have, and even adults and the millennials, seems to be almost exclusively on social media, where the human sort of interaction face to face, looking somebody in the eye and shaking somebody's hand, is almost a forgotten art. Again, I'm not a psychologist or a social professor, but it strikes me that feels to be a more negative approach to communication than one-on-one eye contact and sitting down and discussing something with an individual, where you actually see the individual you're communicating with, as opposed to some version of an individual that is on the internet that you have no idea what is on the other side of your communication link.
Well, there's been a callback. You're seeing right now where individuals are yearning for that face-to-face connection, where I had one guest on and he was talking about like people they want to have smaller meetings. They don't want to have these online webinars. And who would have thought, right? The natural aspect of us to be connected. So I think it ties back even to what you do in the market, to something as real as precious metals. And even with your earliest childhood memory where you shared that pedal car, right, that your father bought for you, it just speaks to so much, I think, metaphorically, in terms of you need to put the work in to get the vehicle to move. And I think that's a principle that will never, ever be removed. So we may stray away a bit from it, but I think it'll never be removed. So for everything that you do, my friend, I appreciate it. The market is something that got the best of the opportunities that you provide in terms of your work ethic, but I have gotten a grand opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate that tremendously, my friend. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
I'm available if anybody ever wants to communicate, if they want to ask specific questions on the markets. Kitco have an open dialogue and communication line with our customers. So I can't promise that if somebody sends me an email, I'll get back the same day, but it's likely that I will get back within 48 hours. So in that context, if any of your listeners want to reach out and ask questions specifically about the markets, please feel free to reach out at me at phug.kitco.com. And I'll be more than happy to give you my best answer possible. Might not be the answer that you're looking for, but I'll give you the best answer that I'm capable of giving.
Love it. Again, amazing audience. Peter Hug. Peter, thank you for being on what is inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones. This podcast is produced by Pod Edits. Visit podedits.com for professional podcast publishing.